You know it's this. Take a perk and a talk of that shit. Money swallowing like sis. Did it perfect in the kid. Got a billion who sang on my head. Look up the better put on the road I just spent. I know we got $1 million. The devil that shit ain't not cheaper again.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to MangaMuse. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the 15th part of What If Naruto Enters K-Pop Demon Hunters. Special note, this fanfic is written and a masterpiece of Slygold on FANFICTIONnet. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. Rumi didn't stop running until the earth itself began to shake. She turned in time to see the sky folding in on itself, the storm exploding outward in a column of light and shadow. The kitsune had taken the serpent far beyond the city, but even from Seoul's coast, the destruction looked biblical. The air split with sound so deep it rattled her bones. She pressed a hand over her heart, feeling it hammer out of rhythm. She could still feel him. His resonance was everywhere, tangled with lightning, soaked into the rain. He was fighting for his life, for her, and all she could do was watch. "No," she whispered, stumbling into the flooded street. "Please don't die on me." A scream echoed somewhere down the block, then another. The city was chaos, hunters rushing to guide civilians, resonance barriers flickering against the relentless winds. The sky glowed with foxfire where the kitsune's tails tore through the storm clouds. And in that light, faint, enormous, and heartbreakingly familiar, she saw him. The storm's heart. Naruto. The kitsune's massive form arced above the city, shielding buildings from the worst of the waves before it vanished toward the sea. Even dying, even collapsing, he was protecting everyone else. That broke her. She pushed through the crowd, soaked to the bone, heading straight for the waterline. "I have to go to him," she said, half to herself, half to the roaring wind. "He's out there, I can feel it." "Rumi." A sharp voice cut through the chaos. She turned and saw two figures sprinting toward her, Zoe, drenched, barefoot, her eyes wide with fear, and Mira right behind her, coat torn, resonance flickering like blue fire around her hands. "Don't you dare!" Zoe shouted, grabbing her wrist as Rumi tried to push past. "You'll die out there." "I don't care." Rumi screamed, jerking free. Her patterns flared bright pink beneath her soaked skin, glowing through the rain. "He's out there, Zoe. I can feel him. He needs me." Myra's voice was low, steady, the calm beneath the panic. "If you go out there, you'll make him worry more when he wakes up." The words hit harder than they should have. "When he wakes up. Not if." Rumi's breath caught. She looked toward the sea again, that endless black expanse where the light had vanished. The pull in her chest was unbearable, dragging her toward him like a tide she couldn't fight. "I can't just leave him," she whispered. "You're not leaving," Mira said, stepping closer, her eyes hard but kind. "You're surviving." That's what he'd want. Zoe wrapped both arms around her, trembling. "Please, Rumi. Please. Let us take you somewhere safe." The three of them stood there for a long moment, rain pouring down around them, sirens wailing in the distance. The storm had quieted, but the silence that followed felt worse. Finally, Rumi nodded, her voice breaking. "Okay." Zoe didn't let go of her hand as they ran. Mira stayed close, glancing back every few seconds at the fading light on the horizon. The city was half ruined, streets cracked, buildings dark, but the old Huntrex Tower still stood a jagged silhouette against the smoke. By the time they reached it, the last of the storm had died. Rumi turned one final time at the glass doors, staring at the faint glow far out at sea. "Hold on," she whispered. "I'm coming for you." Mira rested a hand on her shoulder. "We know," she said quietly. And together, drenched and shaking, they stepped into the tower, the last flicker of light left standing in a city that had just survived a god. The lights in the lounge flickered again, and the hum of the generators filled the silence. Rumi sat curled on the couch, soaked through, her eyes hollow and red. Zoe handed her a towel that she didn't use. Mira stood by the window, watching the rain slide down the glass. Rumi's voice came out rough, barely more than a whisper. You both deserve to know what happened. Neither of them interrupted. It started after the hospital, she continued. After Sasuke was cleared, Naruto and I got on a plane to Seoul. He was so happy he thought we could finally breathe for a while. A broken laugh escaped her throat. He held my hand the whole flight. He kept teasing me, saying I looked too serious. I remember thinking, gods, how do I tell him what Orochimaru said? Her voice cracked on the name. Mira turned from the window, watching her carefully. So you didn't tell him? Rumi shook her head. I couldn't. I was going to, I swear. But when we landed, he looked so alive again. He smiled at me, Mira. After everything. And then Kabuto showed up. Zoe stiffened. Kabuto? Here. Rumi nodded. He was waiting outside the hotel, like he knew exactly where we'd be. Naruto recognized him right away. He got protective, put himself in front of me. I could feel his resonance spike, the air actually shook. Kabuto smiled that awful little smirk and said, You really haven't told him, have you? She looked up, eyes glistening. Naruto turned to me, confused. And Kabuto kept talking. Said Orochimaru's blood runs stronger than anyone thought. Said I'm his daughter. Zoe's hand flew to her mouth. Mira didn't move. I begged him to stop, Rumi said, voice trembling. I told him to shut up, that it wasn't true, but it was. And Naruto just stood there, staring at me like he didn't know who I was anymore. Kabuto laughed and said maybe it was destiny. Maybe I'd betray him too. Her hands were shaking now, fingers knotting in the towel. I tried to explain. I told him I didn't even know until a few days ago, that Orochimaru told me himself. But the look on Naruto's face, she trailed off, swallowing hard. He wasn't angry. He wasn't disgusted. He was hurt. She wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand, but the tears kept coming. His hands went to his swords, not to attack, but like he didn't know what else to do. His instincts just took over. And that was enough. I panicked. My pattern started glowing, and before I could stop it, my eyes changed yellow, slitted. Just like his. The words came faster now, breathless. He froze. I saw it, that second of fear. And I ran. I just ran. I thought if I stayed, if he saw more of it, he'd hate me forever. Zoe crossed the room and dropped to her knees beside her. Rumi, that's not. I ran right into the storm, she said, her voice cracking again. I thought I'd lost him. Then I saw the kitsune over the city, fighting that monster, and I knew. I knew it was him. He was still fighting even after I left him standing in the rain. She broke down again, burying her face in her hands. It's all my fault. If I hadn't hidden it, if I hadn't run, maybe he wouldn't have had to fight alone. Zoe wrapped her arms around her without hesitation. No, no, don't do that to yourself. You didn't make Orochimaru show up. You didn't make that storm. Rumi's voice came muffled through tears. I made him look at me like a stranger. Mira finally spoke, quiet but unwavering. And he still went to save the city. That's who he is. Don't twist that into punishment. Rumi looked up at her, broken and small. He's going to hate me when he wakes up. Mira shook her head. He's going to find you. That's what he does. Rumi wanted to believe her. She really did. But all she could see in her mind was the moment his eyes met hers, the flash of fear, the heartbreak, the silence before she ran. She pressed a hand to her chest. He's alive. I can feel it. But gods, I don't know what I'll see in his face when he looks at me again. Zoe just held her tighter. Myra's voice softened. Then make sure he sees the truth first. And for the first time since the storm began, Rumi nodded. A fragile promise formed on her trembling lips. I'll tell him everything. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime that cut through the silence like a breath. Rumi turned. Naruto stood there, barely upright, leaning against the wall for balance. His shirt was torn, his skin pale beneath streaks of dried blood, but his eyes, those bright, relentless blue eyes, were alive. When they found her, everything else in the room faded. Rumi, he breathed, his voice hoarse but full of wonder, like he couldn't believe she was real. Her patterns, already flickering from the shock, flared brighter. What had been soft pink deepened, shifting through shades of rose until it melted into a luminous blue that pulsed with her heartbeat. She tried to calm herself, but her resonance betrayed every emotion she'd buried: fear, guilt, longing. Then the change hit her eyes. Brown bled into gold, the pupils slitting like a serpent's, bright and sharp even in the dim light. Tiny fangs caught on her lower lip as she bit back a gasp. The reflection in the elevator's metal door was undeniable, Orochimaru's eyes staring back at her from her own face. Panic struck. She turned her head, hands flying up to cover her face. "Don't look at me," she whispered, voice trembling. "Please." He didn't stop walking. Each step was heavy, uneven, the sound of boots scraping metal and stone. When he reached her, he caught her wrists gently but firmly, pulling her hands away from her face. "Rumi," he said, breathing hard. "Look at me." She shook her head, trying to turn away. "You don't understand, I look just like him. Look at me." The command wasn't sharp. It was steady. It was him. Finally, she did. Her eyes met his, golden and trembling. She expected recoil, disgust, horror, anything that would match the shame clawing at her throat. But Naruto just looked at her. He looked for a long time through the glow of her patterns, through the fangs and the slitted eyes, through everything she'd been taught to hide. And when he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, almost reverent. "I don't see him," he said. "I see you." Her breath hitched. "Naruto." He took another shaky step forward, his hand still holding hers. "You think some BLD could ever change that? You think a name could erase what you are to me?" He smiled faintly, soft and tired, the way sunlight looks after a storm. "You're my anchor. My peace. My entire soul." The tears came before she could stop them. "I was so afraid," she whispered. "I thought you'd look at me and see the monster who ruined your life." Naruto's thumb brushed her cheek, wiping away the first tear. "I've seen monsters, Rumi. I've fought them. And none of them ever looked at me the way you do." Then he leaned in, his forehead against hers, breathing her in like it was the only thing keeping him alive. "You're everything good that's ever happened to me," he murmured. "And nothing you could ever be will change that." She tried to protest, tried to speak, but he kissed her instead. It wasn't gentle this time. It was raw, deep, the kind of kiss that carries every promise too big for words. Her hands clutched his torn shirt, his fingers tangled in her hair. Her fangs brushed his lip, cutting him, but he didn't pull away, he only deepened the kiss. When he finally broke it, he smiled faintly, the BLD still glistening at the corner of his mouth. "See," he said softly. "Even that can't hurt me." Rumi trembled, her glowing blue patterns softening with every breath until they faded back beneath her skin. Her golden eyes shimmered wet with tears. "You're bleeding," she whispered again. He smiled through the exhaustion. "Then it means I'm still alive to love you." She let out a choked laugh, half cry, half relief, and buried her face against his chest. His arms wrapped around her, holding her like he'd never let go again. And for the first time since the storm, the light around them wasn't from lightning or resonance. It was just them. The elevator doors hadn't even closed before a voice boomed from down the hall. "Hey! What the hell, Naruto?" Jiraiya barreled into the room, dripping rainwater and adrenaline, looking ready to shake sense into his student. "You're supposed to be in a hospital bed, not." He stopped dead. Naruto and Rumi were still locked together, holding each other like the world might vanish if they let go. Her blue glowing patterns flickered softly against his bandaged skin, his hands rested at her waist, steady and sure. Zoe and Mira appeared behind Jiraiya just as he started to find words again. Zoe immediately grabbed one of his arms, Mira the other. "Nope," Zoe said flatly. "Absolutely not. Don't ruin this." "But," Jiraiya started. "Mstr, read the room," Mira said dryly, pressing the elevator button with one finger. "They've earned 5 minutes." The doors slid shut before he could argue. Silence returned to the lounge, broken only by the sound of rain tapping the shattered windows. Rumi looked up at Naruto, cheeks flushed, eyes golden and unsure. You shouldn't be standing," she whispered. "You almost died." He grinned, the tired kind of grin that made her heart twist. "I was dying," he said. "Then I remembered you still owed me a kiss." Her laugh came out as a choked sob. "Idiot." He leaned his forehead against hers. "You're kind of ceesy when your eyes glow like that," he said, voice soft, teasing. "All demon queen and stormlight." Her face went crimson. "Naruto." He winked, brushing a thumb under her chin. "I like it." Rumi tried to glare, but the corner of her mouth betrayed her. The tension melted, replaced by quiet laughter. When she kissed him again, it wasn't desperate this time, it was gentle, real, full of every unspoken promise left between them. Outside, dawn finally split the horizon, washing the city in pale gold. The storm had passed. And for the first time in a long while, they just held on to each other and breathed. The kiss had barely ended when the elevator doors slammed open. "Naruto Uzumaki." Naruto flinched before she even appeared. "Ah, CRP, he muttered. Tsunade stormed in like a force of nature, hair wild, coat half-buttoned, eyes blazing with divine fury. "You haven't even been checked into the hospital yet. Do you have any idea what you've done? You leveled half the coast, the route is still counting the damage, and you," she pointed at him like a weapon, "are standing here looking proud of yourself." Naruto straightened, trying for a smile. "Well, technically, Hokage-sama, I did just defeat Orochimaru." Her eye twitched. "You detonated Orochimaru. You were told to take it easy a few hours ago. No fighting, no channeling, no storms, and definitely no." Naruto winced. "Yeah, about that." Tsunade grabbed his ear before he could finish. "You're going straight to the hospital before you collapse again. Hey, ow. Easy. I'm fragile." Rumi burst out laughing. "You? Fragile? You blew up an island." Naruto shot her a sideways grin. Even as Tsunade dragged him toward the elevator. "For the record," he said, voice strained, "you were kinda ceesy in demon form." Rumi blinked, her face flushing crimson. What?" He managed a wink, despite the death grip on his ear. The eyes, the glow very intimidating. "I liked it." Tsunade groaned. "Oh, for heaven's sake, stop flirting while I'm hauling you to medical, you idiot." Rumi laughed harder, following close behind. "He really shouldn't be walking, Tsunade-sama. Maybe I should carry him." "Don't encourage him." Tsunade snapped. Naruto grinned wider. "I'm just saying, if my girlfriend wants to carry me." "Shut up." "Ow." Okay. Rumi covered her mouth, shoulders shaking with laughter as the elevator doors opened. Tsunade marched her wayward patient inside while still scolding him about safety reports and reconstruction budgets. Naruto twisted around in her grip, giving Rumi a wink. "You're still gorgeous, demon eyes or not." The doors slid shut on Tsunade's roar. "Do you ever stop talking?" Rumi's laughter echoed through the hall long after the elevator disappeared. For the first time since the storm, the world felt light again. The storm outside the Hunter Medical Complex had quieted, but the room still smelled faintly of ozone like the air itself remembered what had happened. Tsunade stood with her arms crossed, every inch of her radiating authority, though there was a tremor in her hand she couldn't quite hide. Naruto sat on the edge of the examination bed, shirt half torn, eyes steady but distant. Rumi lingered near the door, silent, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. Tsunade's tone was sharp. "Explain everything. From the moment you left the city." Naruto took a slow breath. "Orochimaru appeared not long after we arrived in Seoul. He provoked me, taunted me about my parents, about Rumi." He hesitated, glancing briefly toward her before continuing. "I wanted to end the fight before anyone else was hurt, so I forced the battle away from the city. I used the kitsune to carry him and myself out across the sea to an uninhabited island." Tsunade frowned. "The entire coastline was destabilized by your resonance surge. What happened out there?" He lowered his gaze. "I pushed too far. My storm stance couldn't contain the energy anymore. Lightning, wind, and water were all clashing inside me and it started tearing me apart." His hands trembled slightly as he spoke, though his voice stayed calm. "I could feel my body failing. My muscles were splitting, my lungs filling with blood." Orochimaru knew it. He was laughing. Rumi's breath hitched softly, but she said nothing. "I didn't see another way," Naruto went on. "So I called down 6 lightning strikes, each one stronger than the last. I forced them to hit both of us. It was unbearable. I thought if I could just take him with me, end it there, Seoul would be safe." He looked up at Tsunade then, eyes clear and quiet. The 6th strike hit. After that, there was nothing. The silence in the room was absolute. Even the hum of the equipment seemed to fade. "When I woke up," he continued, "the island was gone. The ocean was boiling. Orochimaru's body was burned beyond recognition. The only thing left was the Kusanagi blade." He paused, his expression unreadable. "Jiraiya found me not long after. I don't remember standing up. My resonance had vanished. My injuries were gone. I shouldn't have been alive." Tsunade's brow furrowed. "You're certain it wasn't resonance healing?" He shook his head. "No. This wasn't healing. It was something else. The power that saved me, it didn't feel human. It felt ancient. I think it wasn't me at all." Tsunade exhaled slowly, her composure starting to fracture beneath the weight of his words. "You understand what this means? You're saying a divine force intervened through you?" Naruto nodded once. "I don't know why it chose me. But I remember what it said before I lost consciousness." He looked down at his hands. "It said it wouldn't take my freedom. That it would carry the pain for me." Tsunade fell silent, the only sound the rain tapping against the glass. After a long moment, she sighed and rubbed her temples. "You should be dead, Naruto. But instead you're sitting here giving me a god's testimony." He met her gaze evenly. "With respect, Hokage-sama, I wasn't trying to be saved. I just didn't want anyone else to die." That broke something in her expression, just a flicker of pride beneath the exhaustion. "You've grown into your title," she murmured. "But next time, you call for backup." Naruto gave a faint, tired smile. "Yes, ma'am." Tsunade stood, pushing her chair back. "You'll be confined to medical observation for 72 hours. After that, the council will convene. They'll want a full report on what happened." "Understood." She turned toward the door but paused, glancing back at him. And, Naruto, her voice softened. You did well. You brought peace to a fight that should have never reached our shores. He inclined his head. Thank you, Hokage-sama. As she left, Rumi stepped forward, her hands still trembling slightly. You really died, didn't you? She whispered. Naruto met her eyes, the ghost of a smile touching his lips. Maybe, he said softly. But when I woke up, you were still here. That was enough. She leaned her forehead against his, eyes closed, and for a long, fragile moment the world was quiet again. The medbay was quiet. Too quiet. Mira pushed the door open just a little, peeking inside. He's been in there all night. Think he's still asleep? Sasuke sighed. We'll just check and leave. The words died on his tongue. Because Rumi was very much not asleep. Neither was Naruto. The blanket shifted just enough to tell them all they needed to know. Sasuke froze. Mira's eyes widened, and for a heartbeat, neither of them breathed. Then Sasuke, voice strangled and barely above a whisper, said, Nope. He shut the door with mechanical precision, turned on his heel, and started walking away. We didn't see anything. We did not see anything. Mira lasted exactly 3 seconds before bursting out laughing, nearly collapsing against the wall. Oh my god, of course they did. Mira. Don't Mira me, Sasuke. You saw his face, he's finally happy. Sasuke rubbed his temples, cheeks faintly pink. I'm begging you, don't ever bring this up again. Inside the room, Rumi's voice was muffled but panicked. Did you? Was that the door? Naruto groaned, running a hand through his hair. Yeah. I think Sasuke just added that to the list of things he'll never unsee. Rumi covered her face, laughing through the embarrassment. Oh no. Naruto chuckled softly, pressing his forehead against hers. Guess we'll have to make it up to them at dinner. She giggled. You mean you will? He smiled, the storm in him quiet at last. Yeah. I probably deserve that. The silence at the ceremony was unbearable. The kind that doesn't mourn out loud, it just presses down, heavy and endless. They stood around the Kazekage spear as the sand winds moved across the desert courtyard. No speeches, no fanfare. The desert had never needed words to bury its dead. Tsunade and Jiraiya stood at the front beside the sand elders. Huntress lined the back, Mira, Zoe, Sasuke, Sakura, their faces set in different shades of grief. Temari's hands trembled as she clung to Zoe, her tears soaking into the other girl's shoulder. 2 women bound by loss, one a sister, the other a lover. Both broken in different ways by the same silence. Naruto stood apart, head bowed, the desert light dull against his cloak. His eyes tracked the slow lowering of Gaara's body, his friend, his brother in burden. The one who had understood the weight of loneliness without it ever needing to be spoken. The wind kicked up, whispering through the dunes. Every grain of sand felt like memory. Naruto didn't speak. He couldn't. Inside him, something pulsed faintly, the dormant core of Miruk. A heartbeat that wasn't his, ancient and patient. He felt it stir, responding to his sorrow, a low vibration in his veins like the ocean before a storm. He could sense them, the others who had fallen. Yujito. Rashi. Han. Hunters who had carried light into impossible battles, and whose resonances were now nothing but echoes, stolen and broken apart. Jiraiya's words haunted him still, someone was rebuilding Miruk, piece by piece. The fragments of divinity scattered across those they called demons, drawn together by hands that believed they could tame a god. But the true core, the soul, was already inside him. He could feel its quiet hum beneath his ribs. Waiting. Watching. The desert sun caught his reflection in the polished steel of his blade, and for a brief second, his irises flared crimson. The color of fury. The echo of something divine. He thought of the island of his lungs filling with blood, of the lightning splitting the sky 6 times in judgment. Of the pain that had torn him apart, and the God that had put him back together. He wanted to destroy them all. Every last one of the monsters who thought they could own what was never theirs. The thought rose unbidden, fierce, clean, and absolute. It wasn't hate. It was inevitability. Rumi's fingers slipped into his. Small. Warm. Her touch steadied the storm before it could rise. Naruto blinked once. The red faded. The hum inside him quieted to a low rhythm again. He didn't say the words aloud. He didn't have to. The vow lived in the silence between heartbeats in the desert wind that carried Gaara to his rest. He would end this. Not for revenge. Not for power. But for every soul that had been taken by the CYCL. Even if the God inside him had to wake again. The runway lights shimmered against the night, their pale glow flickering through the windows of the transport plane. The engines rumbled low, a steady heartbeat against the silence that none of them dared to break. Zoe hadn't stopped crying since they'd left the sand. Her face was pressed into Naruto's chest, her fingers clinging to the fabric of his jacket as though letting go would make the world collapse. He held her without a word, arms wrapped around her like a dragon guarding something irreplaceable, something fragile and precious that needed to be protected at all costs. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, voice raw. The words barely reached her through the hum of the engines, but she felt them. She felt the tremor in his voice, the guilt that weighed behind every syllable. Zoe didn't answer. She couldn't. Her sobs were quiet now, spent but constant, her tears soaking into his shirt. Rumi sat across from them, her eyes lowered, watching the two of them through a haze of exhaustion and sympathy. Sasuke was silent beside her, hands clasped loosely, his face carved from restraint. Mira stared out the window, her reflection flickering in the glass, jaw tight and unblinking. No one spoke. Naruto brushed a strand of Zoe's hair from her face, his thumb catching a tear before it could fall. He looked down at her and then out the window beyond her shoulder at the desert fading into shadow beneath them, at the horizon that promised nothing but more battles ahead. He didn't say it out loud, but the thought burned quietly in his chest. No more. The plane lifted into the dark, carrying the weight of too many losses. And in that dim, trembling cabin, surrounded by the people who had survived, Naruto tightened his hold on Zoe and swore silently, no more graves, no more gods. Not if he could help it. The hospital room was quiet, the sterile hum of machines softened by the muted light from the window. Seoul's skyline glowed faintly beyond the glass, a reminder that even after gods and storms, the city kept breathing. Celine sat propped against the headboard, a blanket draped over her shoulders. Her face was pale, thinner than Rumi remembered, but her eyes were awake again, tired, steady, human. Rumi hesitated in the doorway until Naruto's hand brushed hers, gentle, wordless encouragement. She crossed the room and stopped beside the bed. "You shouldn't be up yet," Rumi said softly. Celine smiled faintly. "I've been asleep long enough." There was warmth in her voice, that same quiet strength Rumi had always relied on when the world felt too heavy. For a moment, she almost wanted to forget why she was here. But then she saw the look in Celine's eyes. It wasn't just fatigue. It was the weight of years finally catching up. "Sit, child," Celine said, patting the edge of the bed. Rumi obeyed, the old habit slipping back too easily. Celine watched her for a long moment before speaking. "You've been through much. I can see it in you. You've met him, haven't you? Orochimaru." Rumi's hands clenched. "Yes." Celine nodded slowly, as if confirming something to herself. "Then it's time you knew everything." Naruto stayed near the window, silent, watching the rain slide down the glass. "Orochimaru was once one of us," Celine began. "A hunter. And not just any hunter, he was brilliant. Ruthless, yes, but he understood demons better than anyone alive. He could track resonance like scent, dissect it like art. He was one of Ryu's best." She paused, eyes distant. And he stole Ryu's heart. Literally and figuratively. Rumi's head snapped up. Ryu, you mean? Yes, Celine said. Your mother. My partner. My friend. The silence that followed felt heavy enough to crush the air. Orochimaru wasn't always like this, Celine continued, voice trembling now. But something in him shifted. He stopped hunting demons and started studying them. Obsessed over their power, their longevity. He wanted to understand what made them eternal. We didn't see it at first, or maybe we didn't want to. But I never trusted him. Naruto's gaze darkened. Celine looked down at her hands. In time, we learned the truth. He made a pact with GWIMA, the demon of the deep void. Sold his soul for forbidden resonance. It twisted him, but it also gave him power beyond comprehension. That's when Ryu became PRGNT with you, Rumi. Rumi's breath hitched. So I'm half demon, Celine said gently. Yes. But not cursed. Her hand trembled as she reached out, brushing her fingertips against Rumi's cheek. You were born from love. From hope. He wanted power, your mother wanted a future. You were the only appealing thing that ever came from him. The tears came without warning. Rumi didn't even bother to wipe them away. Celine's voice grew softer, each word carrying the weight of old grief. When you were born, Orochimaru broke his pact. Killed Ryu to drink her BLD to keep GWMA's gift while severing his bond. It worked. He escaped with his life and his power, but not his soul. That's why he fled the leaf. Naruto's jaw tightened, silent fury flickering in his eyes. I thought if I raised you to hide your patterns, if I could get your Hanmoon to turn gold, maybe you could escape his shadow, Celine whispered. But I was wrong. Rumi shook her head, voice breaking. You weren't wrong. You saved me. Celine smiled weak, but real. No, Rumi. You saved yourself. You're nothing like him. You're light. You always were. For the first time in a long while, Rumi couldn't speak. She leaned forward, wrapping her arms around Celine, holding her tightly as if to anchor them both against the years of pain that had finally surfaced. Celine's hand came to rest on her back. I've loved you like my own, Rumi. Always. And I always will. Naruto turned away, giving them the quiet they deserved, his reflection lost in the rain. In that small hospital room, surrounded by ghosts of love and loss, one truth settled in Rumi's heart like the faint echo of a hymn. She was born from both light and darkness, but it was love that made her real. The rain outside had softened to a whisper by the time anyone spoke again. The air in Celine's hospital room smelled faintly of rain and antiseptic, sterile, but alive. Celine watched Naruto quietly. There was something different about him, and it wasn't just the exhaustion. His presence felt heavier now, older somehow, like someone who had walked through fire and come out knowing what it cost to survive. You've seen him, she said finally. Her tone wasn't a question. Naruto met her eyes and nodded. Yes. Rumi stiffened beside him, her fingers tightening around his sleeve. I fought him, he said quietly. He tried to take her. Said she was his creation, his legacy. His gaze drifted downward, voice growing quieter. He was proud of what he'd done. Of every life he destroyed. Celine's throat worked, but she said nothing. I killed him, Naruto continued. On an island off Seoul. We were alone. No tricks, no seals, just him and me. The words hung in the air like the last echoes of thunder. Celine closed her eyes for a moment, her expression unreadable. When she looked at him again, it wasn't with shock. It was something deeper, understanding. I knew it would come to that, she said softly. The way he lived, the things he did, there was no path left for him but that one. Naruto's hands clenched at his sides. He killed my parents. My sister. He nearly took Rumi. And even then, when he was dying, he laughed. He drew a shaky breath. But it's done now. For good. Celine studied him for a long moment, this boy who had once been her student, this man who carried the weight of storms. Then she smiled, small, tired, but proud in a way that felt almost sacred. I'm proud of you, she said. Not because you killed him, but because you did what no one else could. You ended it. Naruto's throat tightened, his composure faltering just a little. I didn't want to become like him. You didn't, Celine said gently. You fought for life, not power. That's what separates you from him. He swallowed hard, eyes lowering. It still feels empty. That's because you cared, she murmured. Only people with hearts like yours ever feel the weight of victory. Rumi leaned into his side then, her patterns glowing faintly in the low light, soft lilac now, calm as breath. He wrapped an arm around her, his head bowing slightly. Celine's eyes flicked to the faint scars that had replaced his whisker marks. They're gone, she whispered. Naruto managed a small smile. Yeah. I'm free of him, Celine. His gaze shifted to Rumi, tender, steady. We both are. Celine's hand trembled as she reached out, resting it over theirs. Then maybe, she said, her voice thick with emotion, something good finally came of all that pain. The rain outside slowed to a hush, and for the first time in years, it sounded like peace. The hospital lights buzzed softly above them as Naruto and Rumi walked down the corridor, hand in hand. The rain outside had slowed to a silver drizzle, the kind that made the city feel half asleep. Behind them, Celine's room was still glowing faintly, she'd fallen back into a calm rest, the first true peace she'd had in years. Neither of them spoke for a while. The silence between them wasn't heavy anymore, it was comfortable, almost healing. At the entrance, Naruto stopped beneath the overhang. Drops of water slid down the edges of his cloak, catching the soft glow of the streetlights. Rumi tilted her head, watching him with that small, curious smile she always wore when she wasn't sure if he was about to be serious or ridiculous. He looked at her for a long moment, really looked, and a faint grin crept across his face. So, he said, tone teasing, what, no CC demon form tonight? Rumi blinked, caught off guard, and then let out a startled laugh, cheeks flushing. You're impossible. Naruto chuckled, stepping closer until his forehead brushed hers. Just saying. You set the bar kinda high in soul. Maybe I'm saving it for the next time you almost die, she murmured, grinning despite herself. He smirked. Guess I'll have to give you a reason to bring it out again. Rumi laughed, shoving his shoulder lightly, though her fingers lingered against his sleeve. Don't you dare. He leaned down, catching her lips in a slow, soft kiss that chased away whatever shadows still clung to them. When they parted, she rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm beneath. Still think I'm scary, she whispered. He smiled against her hair. No. You're appealing. Always were. Rumi's patterns flickered faintly, just enough to tint the air around them with a gentle, lilac glow. They stepped out into the rain together, laughing quietly as the door closed behind them, two survivors, hand in hand, walking toward whatever storm would come next. Jiraiya sat in the Hokage's office long after the lights outside had dimmed, the city's hum a low whisper beneath the sound of rain on glass. A half-empty bottle of sake rested between him and Tsunade. The air was thick with memory. He poured for both of them, his hands steady despite the weight on his shoulders. The mood was somber, and though Naruto's greatest victory should have felt like triumph, it didn't. Orochimaru was gone, truly gone, and that left a hole that even justice couldn't fill. For all the horrors he'd committed, he had been their teammate once. Their brother in arms. The boy they had fought beside during the demon wars, the man who had taken the hunter's test with them, who had stood shoulder to shoulder through fire and blood. 15 years of shared battle doesn't fade just because the person you knew turned into a monster. Jiraiya sighed and lifted his cup. He was our responsibility, he murmured. Tsunade didn't argue. She just stared into her drink, her reflection fractured in the sake's surface. There was no saving him, she said quietly. He killed Ryu. Rumi's mother. He crossed every line. He did, Jiraiya said. But it still hits different when it's someone you trained with. He took a slow sip, the alcohol burning in a way that felt deserved. Years ago, he used to joke that if any of the Sannin died, the others would pour sake for libation, 1 cup for the fallen, 1 for the living. But tonight he didn't spill a drop. Not one. He let the silence stretch until the weight of it felt like a confession. Do you know what the kid's done, Tsunade? She looked up at him, curiosity dulled by fatigue and drink. What do you mean? Jiraiya's eyes were tired, the kind that had seen too many ghosts. He's killed most of the Akatsuki. There's only 2 left now, Pain and 1 more. The rest are gone. Tsunade set her cup down. Then they'll either cut their losses or come for him. Yeah, Jiraiya said softly. But I don't think he can kill this one. Her brow furrowed. Pain. He nodded. The demons we captured, they called him a god. The word hung between them, thick with implication. Tsunade's eyes darkened. What are we going to do? Jiraiya smiled faintly, that tired, crooked smile that used to hide too many scars. Not we, Tsunade. Me. Her eyes widened. Don't you dare. I have to, he said, his tone gentle but firm. I wasn't there to save Minato. Or Kushina. Or their baby girl. His voice faltered for the briefest moment before he steadied it again. I can't undo that. But I can make sure Naruto doesn't die the same way they did. If this Pain really is a god, then it should be me who faces him. Not the kid. Jiraiya, don't. He reached across the desk, taking her hand in his. It was the first time he'd done that in decades. Tsu, he said softly, the name he'd only ever used once, long ago, when he'd confessed he loved her. You know I have to go. Her voice broke. You'll die. He smiled, the old warmth flickering through the sadness. Maybe. But I'll die doing what I should have done all along, protecting what's left of them. Tsunade's tears slipped free, her composure finally breaking. Jiraiya, please. If I don't make it back, he said, his tone almost tender, tell the kid I loved him like a grandson. He rose, straightening his cloak. The rain outside had begun to fall harder again, strkng the window like veins of silver. Jiraiya walked to the door, pausing only once. Don't wait up, Tsu. The door shut behind him, leaving the room too quiet. Tsunade sat back in her chair, staring at the photo on her desk, 3 young hunters, smiling and alive. Her younger self between them, Jiraiya grinning wide, Orochimaru's expression faintly amused. The ghosts of what they once were. Her hand trembled as she traced their faces. DMN it, Jiraiya, she whispered. For a long moment, she just sat there, the storm outside echoing her pulse. Then her gaze drifted toward the window, toward the city beyond, where she knew Naruto was probably with Rumi somewhere, pretending everything was fine, pretending he wasn't still bleeding inside. Does he know? She whispered into the empty office. Does he feel it that you're walking away for him? The question hung unanswered. Only the rain replied, falling steady and unbroken, as if the heavens themselves were mourning one of their own. The city stretched far beneath them, a living galaxy of glass and light. Seoul at night was appealing in a lonely kind of way, all motion and noise from a distance, but soft and far away up here, on a rooftop where time seemed to hold its breath. Naruto stood near the edge, looking down at the glittering veins of cars and streetlights that pulsed through the streets. Then he turned and there she was. Rumi. The radio played softly behind them, a little static fuzzing through my heart will go on as it whispered into the night. The song drifted across the rooftop like a memory, faint and timeless. Rumi's patterns glowed faintly under the candlelight, magenta lines moving like poetry beneath her gray skin. Her golden eyes were bright and slanted, not monstrous, but mesmerizing. She wore a golden dress that shimmered with every breath of wind, the kind of fabric that seemed born to be touched by moonlight. Naruto reached out his hand. "Dance with me." Her brow furrowed, confused but smiling. "Here. Now." He shrugged, the smile tugging at his lips. "You said you never got to go to a ball. Figured it's about time someone fixed that." Her eyes softened. She hesitated for half a heartbeat, then took his hand. The moment she did, everything else faded away. The sound of cars below, the hum of neon, the city itself all gone. Just the two of them and the soft rhythm of the song. He guided her slowly, one hand at her waist, the other laced with hers. She wasn't graceful at first, she never had been one for slow dances, but it didn't matter. They moved like they'd been doing this forever, her head finding its way to his chest, his heartbeat steady and calm beneath her ear. Rumi laughed quietly as he spun her, her braids swinging behind her. The candlelight caught her eyes gold, alive, burning with something fierce and gentle all at once. When the song rose, Naruto pulled her close again, lowering her just enough to make her giggle. He started to sing under his breath, half whisper, half prayer. "Near far wherever you are." She closed her eyes, smiling. "You're terrible at singing." "I'm perfect," he said softly, "because you're smiling." She looked up at him, her lashes wet from the misty air, and her voice dropped to a murmur. "You really did all this just for me?" He smiled. "Who else would it be for?" Her heart ached in the best way. For once, she didn't hide her patterns or her eyes. She didn't have to. Not with him. He lowered his forehead to hers, the faint electricity of his resonance humming through the space between them. "I remember the first time I saw you," he said. "You were hiding behind Celine in the marketplace." "I was shy," she laughed. He grinned. "You still are." She shoved his shoulder, but her fingers lingered against him. "You love it." "Yeah," he whispered, "I do." The rain started again, not hard, just enough to speckle the rooftop and glisten against their skin. Naruto didn't move to go inside. Neither did she. The song looped softly on the radio, barely audible over the rain. When their lips met, it wasn't rushed. It wasn't desperate. It was steady and deep, the kind of kiss that speaks instead of asks. They didn't pull away for minutes, breathing each other in, letting everything they couldn't say find its way through touch instead of words. When they finally parted, their foreheads stayed together, breaths mingling in the cool air. It wasn't passion, not the kind that burned hot and fast. It was warmth. Peace. The quiet realization that they didn't have to prove anything anymore. They'd survived, and that was enough. He brushed a thumb along her jaw. "You know," he said, smiling, "you're kinda CC in demon form." Rumi laughed, cheeks warming as her fangs caught the light. "You're ridiculous." "Yeah," he said. "Ridiculously in love." Her laughter melted into a sigh as she tucked her face against his chest. "You're not supposed to make me blush, you know." He kissed the top of her head. "Then stop being so easy to fall for." For a while, they just stood there, her arms around his waist, his chin resting on her hair. The rain fell gentle as silk, the city lights painting them in faint gold and violet. After a while, Rumi tilted her face up. "Do you ever think about after? When this is all over?" He thought for a moment, eyes tracing the clouds above. "Yeah," he said softly. "Sometimes. And I think about quiet," he said. "A little house far from all this. You sleeping in late. Me cooking breakfast that probably sucks." She chuckled against him. "You cook?" He grinned. "Hey, I've survived worse." She smiled, eyes glowing softly. "That sounds nice." He nodded. "Yeah. No missions. No hunters. Just us. Just us, she echoed. Silence settled again, not heavy, but full. Full of everything they'd survived, everything they'd lost, and everything they still had. Her patterns pulsed faintly, the magenta softening to lilac, wrapping light around them like a heartbeat. When she looked at him, her eyes weren't golden anymore but brown again, warm, human, alive. He smiled, tilting her chin up. You changed back. She smiled. You seem to like it better this way. He shook his head, brushing his thumb across her lip. No. I liked both. You're you. That's enough. Her voice trembled a little as she whispered, You mean that? He leaned close, his breath warm against her skin. Every word. Their lips met again, slower this time. The kiss tasted like rain and calm and something neither of them dared name. Above them, the clouds parted, revealing a quiet sliver of moonlight. For that night, for the first time in too long, Naruto Uzumaki was not the storm. He was just a man, holding the woman he loved, dancing in the rain beneath a peaceful sky. And for once, the world let him have that. The rain had softened to a mist now, gentle as breath. Candlelight shimmered across the puddles, reflecting the skyline in fragments of gold and violet. The song had long since faded, leaving only the hum of the city and the sound of their breathing. Rumi looked up at him, her golden eyes glinting beneath damp lashes. You know, she whispered, you have to kiss me again. Naruto raised an eyebrow, his voice low and teasing. Is that so? She nodded, the corner of her mouth twitching in that way it always did when she was trying not to smile. It's in the official ball event rules. He chuckled softly, the sound rough and warm in his chest. Official rules, huh? And how would you know that? Rumi giggled, an actual giggle, bright and unguarded, and that was all it took. He leaned in, his lips brushing her neck, slow and deliberate. Her breath caught, and the magenta of her patterns began to glow faintly, pulsing beneath his fingertips as if responding to his touch. He kissed her again, the curve of her throat, the place where her heartbeat met her skin, and her hands found his shoulders, trembling slightly but steadying against him. The world fell away again, just the rhythm of rain and the warmth of two people who had been through hell and somehow found heaven in each other. Naruto's voice was barely a whisper, carried by the rain. I love you, Rumi-kan. She smiled, eyes wet, her voice breaking with the weight of it. And I love you, Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. He smiled, forehead resting against hers, the city's light haloing around them. Guess that makes it official, then. She laughed softly, her patterns dimming to a soft lilac glow that wrapped them both in warmth. Officially yours, she said. They didn't move for a long time. The storm had stopped entirely now, the wind carrying only the faint echo of music and the scent of roses from the rooftop table. Somewhere below, the city carried on oblivious, alive, but up here, it felt like the whole world had gone still just for them. He held her close, the faintest smile playing at his lips. You know, he murmured, this might be the first time the storm's ever been quiet. Rumi looked up at him, her eyes soft and full. Maybe it finally learned how to rest. And together, they stayed like that, two souls who had finally found peace in each other, wrapped in the glow of fading candlelight, while the city slept beneath a gentle, forgiving sky. The first drops of rain returned soft, hesitant, as if even the storm didn't want to intrude on them. Rumi blinked up at the sky, giggling when one drop landed squarely on her nose. Naruto laughed, brushing a few wet strands of hair from her cheek. Guess the weather doesn't want to miss the ball either. Rumi grinned, her fangs flashing in the dim light. Maybe it's jealous. Of what? He asked, wrapping an arm around her waist. She leaned closer, whispering, us. He chuckled, shaking his head. Then let's give it something to be jealous of. The wind picked up as he formed the seal, his resonance sparking faintly in the air. Lightning and mist wove together, condensing into a spectral kitsune, translucent and glowing, its tails flickering with wind and light. It lowered itself, waiting for its MSTR. Rumi smiled as he extended his hand to her again. Our ride, milady. But before he could take a step, her fingers slipped from his. Her patterns flared, glowing bright magenta, and a pulse of energy rippled through the air, hot and electric. Wait, Rumi. She smirked, a playful tilt in her voice. Let me handle this one. The world folded. In an instant, the rooftop, the city, the candles, and even the rain vanished, replaced by the familiar warmth and scent of home. They crashed onto the soft comforter of Rumi's bed in the Huntress penthouse, laughing breathlessly as the last crackle of demon energy fizzled away. Naruto blinked, stunned for half a heartbeat before bursting out in disbelief. I didn't know you could do that. Rumi was still catching her breath, her golden eyes gleaming with mischief. There's a lot you don't know about me, she said, voice low and teasing. He turned to her, still laughing softly. Oh yeah? Like what? She smiled, that slow, wickedly appealing smile that could melt gods and terrify demons. I'm mysterious, she whispered, leaning close enough that her patterns shimmered across both of them like soft light. Naruto smiled, brushing his thumb across her jaw as their laughter faded into quiet. Yeah, he murmured, and that's exactly why I love you. Her smile softened. Good, she said. Because I don't plan on being boring. They lay there for a while, the hum of soul faint through the window, rain pattering softly against the glass. His arms stayed around her waist, her head rested against his chest. The night didn't feel like a pause anymore, it felt like life finally letting them breathe. And as the thunder rolled far, far away, Naruto closed his eyes and whispered, half to her, half to himself, we made it. Rumi smiled, eyes closing, her voice a sleepy echo against his skin. Yeah, she murmured. We really did. Zoe lay on her bed with her phone open and the world reduced to light behind glass. She'd only met Gaara in person once, one awkward, brilliant afternoon, but she owned him in pixels, 1,000 little freezes of the way he tilted his head, the line of his mouth when he smiled, the way his shoulders relaxed when he was comfortable. She scrolled until her fingers stung and stopped on a shot she'd sent to herself the minute after it happened, his grin as she planted a kiss on his cheek, his eyes bright and surprised and entirely sincere. Her chest clenched, raw and terrible. He was quiet, yes. But when Gaara spoke, the room changed its angle, everything sharpened and warmed. She could still hear him arguing, half embarrassed, about the Twilight books, eyes lighting up like they'd found a private son. Those small, ridiculous things were hers to remember, and they felt like crimes to lose. The demons took him. They'd taken his resonance and strpped him of the things that made him Gaara, then tossed him away like something used up. The irony of their efficiency set like ice in her gut, they treated him like toothpaste, squeezing every bright bit until there was nothing left but an empty tube. It didn't matter that he'd had family. It didn't matter that Zoe loved him with that stubborn, soft kind of devotion that keeps you up nights. To them he was a tool. Once the glow was gone, he was trash. She hated them. The word was small and enormous, at once hot behind her ribs. Hate made her hands shake. Hate made her laugh once in the shower until the sound turned into an ugly, animal sob. But hate also made her move, she could not sit with him gone and do nothing. She'd gone demon hunting with Mira and Rumi the next day because sitting felt like betrayal. Rumi had tried to stop her, the soft, practical logic she always used, hand at Zoe's elbow, voice soothing in a way that made you hate comfort for its calmness. Let it go, Rumi had said, like letting it go was as simple as folding a towel. Not everyone gets a happy ending. Zoe had snapped. She'd told Rumi, and Mira with too much breath and not enough sense, that they had everything, two powerful lovers, a life that the world wouldn't swallow. She'd said it meaner than she meant, because grief is a blunt instrument that hits whoever's nearest. Sasuke talking of retirement because he'd lost an arm that made her edge sharper. Gaara hadn't been given retirement. Gaara had died serving the people he loved, why was that not weighty enough to demand the world bend? The hunt was a memory that kept cutting into the present, not letting the present pretend it was all right. They'd found a nest in the bones of an old subway stop, damp, iron-sweet air that tasted like old wounds. Zoe remembered the way light refracted off the puddles, the way a rat skittered and the demon turned its head like it had heard the sound and found it delicious. The demons were smaller than the fairy tales, hunched and frantic, but their eyes were coal. The first one lunged and Zoe moved before she thought, an instinct sharpened to a razor edge by grief. She didn't feel the kill happen so much as note the facts later, the sound cut off, the way the air filled with the metallic smell that always made her GG, the small, inevitable collapse of something that had been moving and suddenly was not. One of them tried to bargain as the life faded, offered names, whispered memories, promises of secrets, and the pleading made her hand tighten anyway. It felt like taking candy away from a child, it felt like making the world understand what had been done. She'd been brutal because brutality was the language they'd used on Gaara. She'd made sure the things that took him knew the sharpness of being made small. Afterwards, BLD on her palms, she'd thought of his hands, how they cupped a tiny ceramic gift, how they'd steadied her when she was shaky and the taste of copper in her mouth turned to bile. The others, Mira, Rumi, had wrapped her in blankets and told her to shower, and she had gone under hot water until the skin on her shoulders felt readjusted. Back in the penthouse, she arranged Gaara's photos on the floor, like an altar or a map of a life she was not allowed to keep. She touched each one as if briefing a survivor, this smile, this laugh, this quiet look when he talked about a stupid book and meant the world. The pictures were small, holy things. She breathed them. She memorized the slope of his jaw, the place his scar caught the light. Grief did strange things to her face. Sometimes she'd be blank, like a screen with the volume down, sometimes a tiny smile would slip and break, and the girls would look at her image and close their own mouths, unsure what to say. She learned to make the rage and tenderness coexist, 1 minute humming a melody he used to hum while she cooked, the next sharpening a blade until the sound of steel on stone was the only thing that steadied her hands. She'd written lyrics for the Saja boys that night, horrible, perfect lines that were nothing but raw. The girls had said no. Too dark, they told her. Too much. But how do you tone down the truth of what they'd done to someone you loved? How do you fold that grief into something performable? So she kept the page crumpled in her jacket, a threat, a promise, a memory. She would speak tomorrow. She'd stand somewhere public and say the names of those who'd done this and make the room answer. She would not let his face be quietly filed under collateral damage. She'd not let the world shrug. When sleep finally took her, it was thin and loud, stitched with fragmentary dreams of a laugh and a hand she couldn't hold. She woke with the taste of iron in her mouth and the plan still bright behind her teeth. Tomorrow she would say something. Tomorrow she would make them listen. For now, she put the phone face down, blinked away the hot salt from her eyes, and whispered into the dark, to a photograph on the floor and into the place where the hurt lived, I remember. I will not let you be forgotten. There was a knock at the door. Not loud, soft, steady. The kind that waited instead of insisting. Zoe wanted to grumble, tell whoever it was to leave her alone. She didn't have the energy for pity or pep talks. But something about the knock, that patient rhythm, made her sigh instead. Yeah, she called, her voice dull from crying. The door creaked open. Naruto stood there in the hallway light, rain still clinging to his hair and jacket. He looked like the storm had followed him home. Can I come in? He asked quietly. Zoe wanted to say no. Wanted to tell him to go back to Rumi, to his warmth, to that strange, appealing peace he'd managed to build out of all his wreckage. But the words wouldn't come. Naruto didn't deserve that, not him. He never told her to move on, never told her to forgive, never tried to fix her with soft words that didn't fit. He understood. That was enough. She nodded. Yeah. Doors open. He stepped inside, closing it behind him without a sound. The room was dim, lit only by Soul's distant glow bleeding through the window blinds. For a moment, he didn't say anything. He just stood there, solid, present, quiet in that rare way that felt like safety. Then, softly, he said, "I brought you something." He sat down beside her and unwrapped the bundle in his hands. Zoe blinked when she saw what it was. "Gaara's gourd," she whispered. Naruto nodded, eyes on the floor. "It crumbled when we found it," he said quietly. "But I fixed it." "Sort of." He ran a thumb along its edge. "It's not the same one, the original's gone. This one's made from his sand. I used what I could save." Her breath hitched. She reached out, hands trembling, and took it carefully from him. The surface was warm, like it remembered being alive. The moment her fingers touched it, her chest broke open. The sob came before she could stop it, sharp, shaking, pulled straight from somewhere too deep for words. Naruto didn't speak. Didn't try to. He just moved closer and wrapped his arms around her. No platitudes. No "you'll be okay." Just quiet, steady warmth. Zoe buried her face in his shoulder and cried until there was nothing left. He didn't move the whole time, just held her like he was anchoring her to the world. She could feel his heartbeat through his shirt, slow and even, grounding. His hand rested against her back, the same patient rhythm he used when calming a frightened child. She thought of everything he'd lived through, his family slaughtered by demons, the years marked and hunted, fighting the twisted remnants of the people who'd loved him. She thought of how the same man who had borne all that could still sit here now, quiet and kind, just to help her carry her pain for a little while. His cheeks looked different without the whisker marks. Softer. Human. Free. Hours passed like that. The storm outside died, but they didn't notice. Her tears slowed, her breathing evened, and finally exhaustion took her. She fell asleep against his shoulder, her hand still clutching the gourd. Naruto waited a moment, listening to the faint, steady sound of her breathing, before gently easing her onto the pillow. He stood slowly, careful not to wake her. When he turned to leave, something caught his eye, a faint shimmer in the air, like dust moving against gravity. A thin trail of sand had lifted from the gourd, swirling lightly in the dark. It circled Zoe once, almost tenderly, before settling again. Naruto smiled faintly. "Guess you're not really gone, huh?" he murmured. He pulled the blanket over her shoulders, gave the gourd one last glance, and slipped out of the room. The sand shifted once more, curling protectively beside Zoe's hand, and for the first time since Gaara's death, the room didn't feel empty. The air on the balcony was cool and wet, the last of the rain still clinging to the rails. Seoul shimmered below, an ocean of lights and motion, alive and loud and utterly indifferent to the quiet moment happening far above it. Naruto stepped out, his jacket half-zipped, his hair still damp from the shower. Zoe's room had been silent when he left, only the faint shimmer of sand keeping watch. He needed air. He needed something that wasn't grief. He didn't expect to find Jiraiya already there. The old man stood near the railing, coat drawn tight, hair heavy from the drizzle. His face looked softer than usual, not tired exactly, but settled, like a storm finally giving up its fight. Naruto blinked. "Hey, Jiraiya-sensei," he said quietly. "You're out late." Jiraiya smiled without turning. "Can't sleep. City's too noisy. Feels like the world keeps moving even when you don't." When he did face him, there was something strange in his eyes, peace and weight all tangled together. Naruto frowned. "You okay?" Jiraiya chuckled, a low, worn sound. "Yeah. Just thinking." He reached into his coat and pulled out an envelope, folded and creased from being handled too much. "Got something for you." Naruto took it, confused, and unfolded the paper. The words made him still. Legal adoption, guardianship, grandparental claim. He blinked. "Grandfather?" Jiraiya shrugged lightly. "Didn't sit right, you going through life without family on record. Figured I'd fix it while I still can." Naruto stared at him, something sharp and tender caught in his chest. "Why now?" Because I finally could, Jiraiya said simply. And because you've more than earned it. Naruto's throat tightened. Old man. Don't start, Jiraiya said, half laughing, half sniffling. I'm still handsome, you BRT. Naruto moved forward before he could stop himself and wrapped his arms around him. The hug was rough and sudden, years of unspoken love packed into one motion. Jiraiya froze, then let out a soft, broken laugh, his hand coming up to pat Naruto's back. Hey now, he murmured, you'll ruin my image. Naruto didn't let go. I'm honored, he said quietly. And I love you, Jiraiya. The older man swallowed hard, blinking too fast. Yeah, love you too, kid. When Naruto finally stepped back, Jiraiya looked at him really looked. He saw not the prodigy or the hero or the weapon the world tried to make, but the boy he'd pulled out of the wreckage all those years ago. The unconscious child lying in the mud after Orochimaru's ambush, skin burned from a failed seal, breath so shallow Jiraiya hadn't been sure he'd make it. He saw the same kid, years later, training until his hands bled, refusing to give up even when his body gave out. He saw the boy who'd cried over his failures and then learned to laugh again. And now, standing before him, was a man strong, kind, scarred, whole. Jiraiya felt something unclench in his chest. For the first time in decades, he was at peace. He'd lived long enough to see this boy become everything he'd hoped for. That was enough. He reached over his shoulder, unfastened the massive scroll on his back, and handed it to Naruto. One last thing, he said. Don't open it. Just keep it safe. Promise me. Naruto frowned, gripping the heavy scroll. Sensei, what's? Promise me, Jiraiya repeated, more gently this time. Naruto hesitated, then nodded. I promise. Jiraiya smiled, his eyes wet in the faint city light. Good. That's all I needed. He turned toward the stairwell, the wind tugging at his coat, his hair a pale ghost in the rain. You're acting weird, Naruto called, half smiling. Even for you. Jiraiya laughed, not looking back. Maybe I'm just proud. Don't overthink it. He paused at the top of the steps, glancing back one last time. The city lights framed Naruto in gold, the kid he'd found half dead, the kid who'd grown into a man the world would follow. Jiraiya let the sight etch itself into memory. Yeah, he thought. That's enough. Out loud, he said, take care of them, Naruto. And live. Don't waste the peace you've earned. Then he disappeared into the mist. Naruto stood there a long time, the scroll heavy in his arms, the paper in his pocket already smudged by rain. He didn't understand why this felt like goodbye, but deep down, something in him knew. He looked out over Seoul's skyline, at all the storms he'd survived, and whispered into the night. Goodbye, Grandpa. The rain swallowed his words, carrying them after the man who'd finally found his peace. Sasuke lay in bed, the sheets tangled around his legs, the quiet hum of the city seeping faintly through the curtains. Myra's breathing was soft against his shoulder, her hair a spill of dark silk over his chest. He looked down at her, tracing the shape of her face with his eyes, the faint curve of her lips, the small wrinkle that appeared when she dreamed. Even asleep, she looked so alive it hurt a little. He smiled, a real one, small and private, and pressed a kiss to her forehead. She murmured something incoherent and nuzzled closer, her hand tightening around his. Sasuke turned his gaze to the bedside table, where a folded paper sat beneath the lamplight. He reached for it, the pen already waiting. The words at the top were simple, but they carried more weight than any weapon he'd ever held. Letter of resignation. He read it again. He'd written it twice already, once out of anger, once out of exhaustion. But now, for the first time, the ink felt steady. The war was done. The BLD had dried. He'd fulfilled every oath he'd made, avenged his clan, buried his brother, fought for the world that once rejected him. There was nothing left but the quiet, and maybe, finally, he could let himself live in it. He signed his name at the bottom. Uchiha Sasuke. The ink bled a little, soaking into the page. He stared at it for a long time, then set the pen down. His hand trembled slightly, not from regret, but from release. Mira stirred beside him. "You're still awake," she mumbled, voice thick with sleep. "Yeah," he said softly. She cracked one eye open, smiling faintly. "You look like you're thinking too much again." He chuckled under his breath. "Maybe. But for once, it's not about war." Her smile widened, lazy and appealing. "Then it must be about me." He smirked. "Maybe." She leaned up, kissed his jaw, and whispered, "Good. Think about me more." He turned toward her, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "That's the plan." She laughed softly, settling against him again, and within moments her breathing evened out. Sasuke watched her for a while longer, then looked back at the paper. His signature gleamed faintly in the dim light. He exhaled, slow and long, the sound like something breaking free inside him. No more orders. No more BLD. No more ghosts. Just her. Just peace. For the first time in his life, the thought didn't scare him. The sun hung heavy over the savannah, burning everything in gold and silence. Even the wind moved slowly here, hot and dry, carrying dust instead of comfort. Sakura pressed her hand to the earth, feeling the faint pulse of corrupted resonance beneath the surface. "They're close," she said softly, her breath catching just a little. "3 of them. Maybe 4. Lee straightened beside her, his grin flashing bright under the harsh light. "Then we'll end this quickly, my flower. For the people they've taken." Niji nodded, calm as ever, eyes scanning the horizon. "We'll flank from the east. Keep your guard up." Sakura smiled faintly, rising to her feet. "Always." They moved through the dunes and practiced formation, 3 veterans who no longer needed words. The demons struck first, shadows bursting from the cracks in the sand. The fight was short and efficient, a blur of movement, of steel and resonance and sun-flashed grit. When it was done, the air stank of scorched decay. Sakura wiped the back of her hand across her mouth and turned away before they could see. Her knees wavered, just slightly. Lee was at her side in an instant, his hand warm on her shoulder. "Sakura. Are you all right?" She forced a smile, steadying her breath. "Just tired," she said, voice smooth from years of lying to patience and now to the people she loved. "It's the heat." Lee's brows drew together, concern written all over him. "You should rest." "I'm fine," she said quickly, gently. "Really?" He hesitated, then nodded, trusting her. He always did. When he turned to check on Niji, she pressed her hand to her lips and coughed. The sound was soft, but the BLD that bloomed against her glove was dark and undeniable. She stared at it for a long moment before wiping it on her sleeve. It had started after the sand mission. A toxin that lingered deep, corrosive and untraceable. She'd tested every treatment she knew, BLD filters, resonance stabilizers, even her own prototypes. Nothing worked. It wasn't spreading anymore, but it wasn't stopping either. Every time she fought, every time she pushed her body too far, it reminded her, 5 years, maybe less. And she hadn't told anyone. Not Tsunade. Not Niji. Not Lee. Especially not Lee. She couldn't bear to see the look in his eyes, that endless optimism cracking under something he couldn't fix. He deserved to smile until the end, even if she didn't get to. Her hand slipped into her pouch, fingers closing around a slim metal injector. She pressed it against her thigh and released the dose. The burn of the serum spread up her leg, clearing her vision, steadying her pulse. The effect would last a few hours, enough to finish the mission. Enough to keep moving. Just a little more time, she prayed silently. "Let me have that." "Sakura." Lee called from ahead. They were guarding a caravan. Survivors need treatment. She smiled faintly, tucking the injector away. On it. The medic mask slid back into place, calm, capable, unshakable. She jogged toward the others, the wind carrying her hair like a banner behind her. Lee grinned when he saw her coming, pure and proud and so heartbreakingly alive. She matched his grin as best she could. If this was the time she had left, she would use it the only way she knew how, saving others, standing between them and the dark, just like she promised when she first put on her hunter's coat. The desert stretched wide and endless before her, heat waves dancing like ghosts, and she whispered under her breath, too quiet for anyone to hear. Just a little longer. Weston is working. Someone tell me if there is continuity errors in this chapter. Not with the story, just the chapter. The rough draft was 15,000 words and now it's like 12,000. I don't know if that's because of so many grammar errors or Weston just start bugging out and just mashing chapters and early drafts together. It rained in Amigacure the way an old wound weeps, slow, constant, refusing to close. Lightning stitched the sky in crooked seams, and every flare of white found its echo in the high window of the tower where Payne stood unmoving, hands loose at his sides, eyes like violet coals watching a city built from hunger and iron. The chamber breathed with him. Molten veins pulsed along the walls, amber light thudding in time with a heart that was no longer entirely human. The glow ran into black stone, into floor and ceiling, into the iron ribs of the tower, as if Sayaka himself had learned how to live inside architecture. Conan stood behind him with her paper wings half open, their edges whispering in the draft. The rain always made her work sing, every sheet remembered the river they'd folded it away from. She watched Payne's back and the faint distortion of air around him, the way heat bent straight lines. He hadn't spoken in a minute and then an hour, but silence meant nothing here. He was listening inward, where the god moved. "We strike soon," he said finally, no louder than the rain. The Namikaze's ascent accelerates. Each victory teaches his body what sleeps beneath his ribs. If we wait, even gods will bleed. Conan stepped closer, the paper of her wings murmuring, the sound like breath through 1,000 throats. "Naruto," she said, tasting the name, letting it soften on the tongue. He erased Orochimaru with a storm. He didn't summon power. He became it. Payne turned, the rings in his eyes catching the molten light and making halos within halos. "Miruk," he answered. "Not as myth. As marrow. The last shard of the Creator's soul has set its root, and the earth has remembered its father." He lifted his chin toward the window. Thunder walked across the rooftops. Do you know why he weaves elements without fracture? Because elements are not variables to him. They're children. When he calls, wind bends because it learned its first shape from Miruk's hands. When he lifts water, oceans remember the lullaby they were born to. Lightning splits at his thought because he is the old grammar of thunder. Conan watched the rain threading itself into ropes. "The world recognizes its maker," she said, almost reverent, and then the reverence snapped. "And you plan to unmake him?" "I plan," Payne said, "to finish what divinity began." He didn't pace. Gods don't. He simply existed several feet away from where he had been, the air left behind him cooler, the heat of Sayaka trailing like a scent. "Once," he said, "there were 2 suns. Miruk, the first light, sculpted order from quiet mountain spines, river vales, the long bones of forests." Sayaka watched and envied. When mortals bowed to the hands that made them, Sayaka promised something sweeter than gratitude: freedom without cost, fire without debt. They turned, and heaven cracked. "The first demons fell from that crack," Conan whispered. "Not born evil, born from broken God." "And the first hunters from Miruk's mercy," Payne said, "mortals lit with the last ember of his will to keep." Between them, the only balanced things that lived were the Han Moon and Gwima, formed from the leftover shock of a sky shattering neither mercy nor malice, only weight and counterweight. Everything else has been echo. Flinders of God wearing meat. He let that hang, and the chamber let it sing. The molten veins glowed brighter for a breath, dimmed, brightened again like a thing pleased with its own name. Conan did not pretend innocence. She had wanted this years before Sayaka found Nagato's bones. The first time she stood in this tower and felt the city kneel in rain, something in her had unclenched. She had been a child in a war that didn't know her name, a hungry thing that learned how to fold paper into knives. Jiraiya had found her with mud on her knees and taught her how to make wings. He had spared them when the world called them collateral her, Yahiko, Nagato. He had fed them on stolen rations and laughter, shown them there was softness inside shinobi armor. He had left them alive out of pity, and she had owed him for years. But pity evaporates in a graveyard. And dead is only a living thing if it breathes. Yahiko's body had gone cold in her arms. The rain had never stopped. She wanted what pain wanted, an end to begging the sky for mercy that never came. Let the world kneel. Let it hold its breath long enough to hear its God speak. If that meant building a throne from bones, she would cut the wood herself. You're not afraid, she said, because you've already turned him into arithmetic. Not arithmetic, Pain said, amused. Alchemy. He gestured into the dark beyond the molten light. From the far wall, spheres woke columns of glass, fluid thick as honey inside them, each orb lit from its heart. There were 7. They burned in different colors and temperatures, a furnace red that breathed, an arctic blue that hissed vapor, a slick oil black threaded with silver veins, a gold white that crackled, a deep green shot through with ash, a storm-like violet that clutched at the eye, and a silver that looked like a scar dressed in moonlight. Conan listened. Behind her own breath, past the storm, she heard it, the whispers inside the glass. Not language. Element. And in the element, names that had been spoken in prayer and dispatch both. Yujito, she breathed. Rashi. Han. Utakata. Yagura. Fu. Her lips trembled. Killer Bee. Pain's gaze warmed the way a furnace warms. The vessels were not accidents, he said. They were pieces of a map Miruk left on purpose without knowing he left it. Resonance refined by generations, a choir of elements that remembered the old harmonies. I harvested what remained. B was the tersest song, all muscle and lightning, but he sang like thunder when Sayaka took him apart. You turned saints into fuel. I turned resonance into God, Pain corrected gently. Their bodies were cages. Their deaths were keys. I merged their currents into mine, layered element on element until it stopped being weather and became law. Sayaka needs more than a voice. He needs a throat. He needs a spine. He needs wrists and a mouth and a city to look up at him and say, yes. Conan could see it when he stepped closer, the human silhouette like a sleeve over something vast. Bands of liquid gold flowed under his skin. Lightning swam the channels between bone and muscle. Wind combed through him from shoulder to hip. Water circled his lungs the way fish circle a slow anchor. The molten veins in the walls were only the smallest mouths of a larger river that ran through him. He's almost finished, Pain said softly, Sayaka's echo threading the words. When we cut the last tether, when the Namikaze breaks and the girl dies, Sayaka will stand up inside me and the sky will be simple again. Conan had built the nets that would make that true. She had folded paper until her fingers bled. She had laced her origami into the city's ribs, into gutters and girders, into rain spouts and the hollow columns of statues. She had slipped seals into nests of pigeons, under children's chalk drawings, into the nap of old carpets in alleys where no one slept anymore. When Jiraiya came, he would find thorns in sugar. When Naruto came after, he would find teeth in prayer. She thought of dead of Jiraiya's hands wrapping bandages that first winter, of the taste of hot broth he had stolen for them, of his stupid jokes that had made Yahiko laugh until he hiccuped. She had wanted this tower, this weather, this man with God for BLD long before she learned the script for worship. Wanting didn't make her clean, but it made her honest. Her fingers curled on the edge of her wing until paper creaked. 2 weeks ago, she said, almost conversationally, I found the toad mark near the western sluice. He came back, you know. Years ago, quiet as a priest. He left without seeing you. He looked at our city like a man told he had outlived his child. Pain did not turn. He spared us once. Out of pity. He will not be spared twice. Conan let the next breath hurt. I owe him, she said. For keeping my bones where they belonged when the world wanted them broken. And you will pay that debt, Pain said, and the molten veins brightened as if in agreement. You will show him what his pity raised. A god, Conan. Not a child. Thunder walked the distance between towers. The chamber seemed to lean in, wanting the next word. Why now, she asked. Why not let the boy burn himself out? Love will keep Miruk asleep, you said. Leave him his girl. Leave him his quiet. Pity him. You of all people know how to use pity. Because the earth is accelerating toward him, Pain said simply. The storm comes when he calls, and it's beginning to come when he breathes. The longer he lives, the more the world remembers being young. I will not let creation get nostalgic. He turned at last. For a heartbeat the room showed a different mask over his, a face made of black fire and white teeth, a hollow sun smiling from the bottom of a well. Then there was only Nagato's ruined beauty again, and the eyes that had learned how to look through walls. We'll peel away the kindness that keeps him from waking, he said. Miruk will not rise from rage. So we will salt his love until it cannot grow. His gaze slid past Conan to the spheres on the wall. The violet one hissed and flashed, a storm clawing its jar. Rumi Kong first, he said, almost tender. The half-BLD, Orochimaru's child. She is the soft part of him. Bleed the softness out. Conan's wings lowered. I'll lay the path, she said. Paper to guide the knife. I want him to see me when he looks up. I want him to understand we chose this. Something moved in the far distance, a pressure shift the way a predator's step shifts the air in a brush. Pain's head tipped, listening to a frequency the rain did not carry. Siaka smiled with his mouth. An intruder in my city, he said, delighted. He smells of old mountains and amphibian prophecy. He thinks he is quiet. He thinks pity is armor. Conan closed her eyes. The picture rose by itself, white hair slick with rain, a profile she had known before she knew her own, a laugh bruise blue around the edges. Jiraiya would come through the sluices like a rumor, and she would meet him with folded knives and a prayer she had stopped believing years ago. Jiraiya, she said. Pain moved toward the door without walking. The molten veins nearest the latch flared and the metal softened, then ran down like candle fat. He didn't look back when he spoke. Do you remember the first bread he broke for us? Conan nodded once. He gave Yahiko the heel. Said it built character. Then let him have the heel again, Pain said. And the ash that follows. The storm swallowed him. The hole he left in the room took a long time to fill. Conan stood alone. The 7 spheres hummed, each a throat with a different scream in it. She walked to them, laid her palm on the glass of the scar-colored one. It was colder than rain but warmer than grief. Something inside turned toward her hand like a fish toward a boat's shadow. She let herself speak with her mouth, not her mind. I wanted this, she said. I chose it. Don't look at me with clean eyes. The paper of her wings sighed when she drew them in. She crossed to the workbench under the dead map of the city and set both hands among the tools: ink, thread, seals, the needles that pierced and the stamps that made law from pressure. She lifted a stack of little paper cranes and set them in a neat line that led to the trap she had built in the lower vault. She folded a lily and pushed it between 2 doorframes in her head. She moved pieces that were not wood. Below her, the rain thickened into sheets. Somewhere near the western sluice, a shadow slipped under a grate and came up coughing. Somewhere nearer still, a man in a tower turned his face to the storm and smiled with someone else's mouth. And far away, too far to feel it but near enough to be changed by it, the earth turned its face toward a boy who had dared to love a girl more than he hated the world. Once, humanity believed the gods had abandoned them. It had been easier to blame absence than admit complicity. But the truth was older and less kind. The gods had lain down in the dark places of people and learned how to dream with human lungs. They woke in fits and starts, with kindness sometimes, often with heat. When they woke fully, the weather changed. Conan pinned her hair, pressed BLD to paper, and whispered a seal alive. The ward crawled up the pillar like ivy and disappeared into stone. Let's end it, she said to the room, to the city, to the boy who had taught her to fly and the man who would make her kneel. Let the world remember it was loved too much to be free. The tower listened. The molten veins brightened, hunger in their light. The spheres sang their low, terrible lullaby. In the sluices, Jiraiya found the first crane. He smiled, wet and weary, and followed. The rain in Amigacure came down like blades. Not the soft, apologetic kind of rain that gentles a city back to sleep. This fell in hard, slanted lines that stung skin and sang on iron. Jiraiya let it carve tracks through the dust on his face, down the old scars along his jaw. The drops hit his shoulders and hissed, steam rising where his resonance ran too hot under the skin. He adjusted the hang of his cloak and kept walking, heel to toe on slick stone, a hunter's rhythm steady enough to pin a metronome to. He'd always loved storms. As a boy, he'd thought thunder was the sky practicing to be brave. As a man, he had learned that sometimes bravery sounds like silence instead, like the soft click of a polearm haft settling into a fighter's palm, like the breath you don't waste on speeches. He knew who waited at the end of this street. Children he had fed and scolded and praised. Children who had grown up under his hands like stubborn saplings, then bowed to a different god and turned those hands into knives. Tonight he was going to kill them. He wasn't here for hatred. He was here for duty. A paper crane skated along the gutter beside his boot, wings soggy, neck bowed. He stopped. Another spiraled down from somewhere high and unseen. Then another. They gathered around him like hesitant birds who'd forgotten how to fly. Right, he murmured, voice low, smoke scratched. Show me the door. He reached between his shoulder blades not for wood or steel, but inward and pulled. The air answered with a low, aching hum, like a temple bell rung underwater. Light poured from his sternum in a slow, steady spill, as if his rib cage were a brazier and someone had nudged the coals. It hurt, but not the way wounds hurt. It was the ache of letting go of something you've carried too long and too close, warmth surrendering its shape, memory agreeing to become edge. The light condensed. Lengthened. Breathed. A polearm formed in his hand, half flame, half wind, the blade a long, irregular crescent that looked forged from sunrise. It weighed exactly what his soul weighed. He flexed his fingers once on the wrap. The balance was perfect. It always was. Sorry, kid, he said under his breath, thinking of blonde hair and a laugh that had kept 1,000 ghosts from sleeping. Was gonna teach you this someday. The cranes drifted. He followed. They led him down into the bones of the city, narrow stairs slick with algae, tunnels that smelled of iron and old rain, the consistent, faint vibration of god pressure combing through the air the way a reef combs the sea. Siaka's pulse beat through the stone, too regular, too cold. It set Jiraiya's teeth on edge. She stepped out from the dark. Conan wasn't a statue, but the word wanted to apply to her, carved, exact, a woman built out of faith with no room left for compromise. Her paper wings unfolded with a whisper that sounded like winter. She was wet through and still looked holy. You came alone, she said. Her voice carried cleanly down the pipe. Jiraiya didn't slow. Always did my best work that way. You could have left us in peace, she said, the syllables precise. You could have left your pity where you buried Yahiko. He stopped 3 paces away. Up close he saw the rain caught in her lashes, wavered there, refused to fall. Think this is about pity? He shifted the polearm so the haft rested against his forearm, blade slightly down, body angled a stance that invited an attack and punished it. I'm here because you took everything from a boy and called it a plan. Because you turned my lessons into loopholes. We built a better world, she said. You built a graveyard, he snapped, and the echo moved like a WHP crack. And filled it with people who trusted you. The tunnel quivered. He didn't raise his resonance so much as stop holding it down. Power bled off him in slow waves, golden and thick, and the water running along the floor wobbled and then ran backward toward him, as if gravity had remembered an old allegiance. His eyes shifted, iris ringed orange, pupils narrowing, the gaze of a predator who has no more room in his day for second chances. Conan's mouth parted barely. You would risk the lives above us? The humans in this city kill them to kill us? Something like amusement touched his mouth and was gone. Conan. You think these eyes are for show? He tapped his temple with 2 fingers. Sage. Nature's not outside me, it's in me. I can feel every heartbeat in Amigacure. He tilted his head, listening, the way fishermen do when the sea says something soft. When he spoke, there wasn't triumph in it, only a bitter mercy. There aren't any. Her breath stuttered, a small sound. The paper at her shoulder trembled. She knew enough to ask the right thing. Miruk? Closer than that, he said, not unkind. But you finally get the point. A sage is one with what lives. The blade lifted a hair. And that means I can take down what pretends to. He moved. Conan tried to split wings to confetti, body to scatter, but his pressure flattened the trick mid-bloom. He slid his right foot, drove the front heel, and dropped the blade between stone ribs of the sewer. The shockwave ran like a fault line. Air compressed and screamed. Water turned to mist and then to nothing. She buckled to her knees like the tunnel had suddenly tripled its weight. Fire punched through the ceiling. Jiraiya pivoted, hands re-gripping without thought, half rolling in his palms. The column met his blade, curled around it like a river vein around a rock, and he twisted. Flame obeyed the problem. He set it bent, narrowed, refocused, and he slung it back down the tunnel. The blast took Conan square, detonating into a hot bloom of light and paper that slammed her through the next chamber and out into the storm above. Pain landed through the smoke. Rain steamed on his shoulders, orange hair pasted to his brow, eyes ringed in false holiness, Siaka's circuitry pulsing beneath the skin. He raised his hand, casual as a king. The scorch across his palm surprised him. He stared at it black, spidering then at Jiraiya. Impossible, he said, the word oddly human on his mouth. You tried to absorb me? Jiraiya asked, voice gone quiet. The trick of a good teacher, make the student say the conclusion himself. You can't drain a thing that's not pretending to be power. Pain's eyes narrowed. Orochimaru was Sannin. You could barely fight him. The god light in his gaze brightened. How are you this much stronger? Jiraiya's smile showed a canine. Orochimaru was never dumb enough to let me go all out. They broke the tunnel. Lightning knotted in Pain's palm and came down in a single white bar. Jiraiya took it on the blade and it wrapped the polearm's windskin, catching charge like a sail, folding it around the curve. He shifted weight, hips and wrists in the same sentence, and threw it back. Pain slipped left barely and a skyscraper above them erupted into a blue-white blossom of broken glass and heat. For the first time in a very long time, the god looked at a man and felt his own hands get colder. Jiraiya didn't press. He flowed. A half step in, an elbow skim, a shorthand butt strike that would have taken a jaw off if Pain were made of anything less than lies. Pain's rods came in like answers written before the question, and Jiraiya slid alongside them, never where the math said he should be. His wind wasn't the breeze that lifts a child's kite. It was the kind that strips bark and lungs and names. Conan. Pain called, checking the air. Jiraiya gave him something to worry about. He sank the haft, pivoted over it, and hurled a compressed scythe of wind that tore the corridor like fabric. Somewhere above, something huge gave way. The blast found Conan mid-formation, caught her clean and threw her through 3 concrete walls into the rain. Pain's composure cracked. You think killing us will bring them back? Nothing brings anyone back, Jiraiya said, and this time his voice was a grave marker. He shifted his grip a millimeter. But it can make sure they're not used again. They rushed God and man. The pipe was a throat they both outgrew at the same time. The storm above accepted them with the generosity of a stage that had been waiting for this scene since the first wall was stacked. Amigakure stretched around them in steel ribs and black water. Lightning drew maps on the undersides of clouds. Jiraiya breathed once, deep. The world breathed with him. The polearm steadied. Forgot something, Nagato, he said. Pain's stance faltered half an inch. The name hit like a touch on a seam you pretend isn't there. What? I trained you to be human, Jiraiya said, and met him, and you chose to be God. They broke the city. It wasn't one strike. It was a series of choices made quickly and correctly. Jiraiya stepped inside a spear line, slid a rod off his forearm, cut shallow to threaten tendon, spun to threaten again, chose not to take the eye because he needed the god to see what came next. Pain overcommit first time all night and Jiraiya punished it with a vertical cut that would have halved the temple's main door. Rain atomized around the blade. The shockwave spread as a clean circle, walls sloughing into dust. Somewhere 3 streets over, all the windows of a building exhaled at once. Pain recovered, set his will, and raised a hand. Enough, he said, Siaka's depth thrumming behind the syllables. I gave them purpose. You gave them pity. Let's see which endures. Cracks ran out across the plaza like veins. From them climbed bodies too many each built from corrupted resonance and old uniforms, the living dead of ideology, a tide of nukneen and captured hunters, eyes glowing red through rain, mouths empty of breath. The army advanced with the sleepy certainty of a tide that has never in its life considered turning back. Jiraiya rolled his shoulder, feeling the tendon catch, the old injury sing. He could catalog every complaint his body made. He had learned to love that honesty. Pain didn't get those reports anymore, gods don't have nerves. Come on, then, he said gently. Let's be done. The first rank hit him like an answer key, every angle righteous, every intent wrong. He cut short and mean, polearm speaking in consonants. A tight backhand across a clavicle, crack. A drop step, low cut at knee height, give. Half turn, butt smash to the temple, sleep. He threaded fire through the haft with the ease of a man buttering bread, little flares blooming off each contact, blossoming into suns when they left his reach. A demon in a Jonin's tatters, blurred lightning running down his calves to make speed where strength failed. Jiraiya did not turn. He reached, found the throat by absence of air more than presence of neck, and squeezed. Skull cracked in his palm bone conceding and the body went to ash so quickly the rain didn't get a chance to make it mud. Pain's spears came again, black rods wickering, and Jiraiya let the haft do the talking. It spun in his hands in ways that looked like arrogance and were actually economy. Sparks tracked the edge like comets. You should be dust, Pain said, surprised to find he was breathing harder. Already am, Jiraiya said, and offered the god a sad smile. I've just decided to hold the shape a little longer. He stamped a seal pattern into the stone with the ball of 1 foot. Summoning great flame toads. The plaza cracked along the lines he set, not magic, just agreement, and 3 hulks pulled themselves up out of the geometry, toads big as houses, bodies made of braided wind and fire. They didn't roar so much as loom. The air bent around them the way heat bends air over a road. They went at Pain with the simple ethics of weather. The god absorbed the first blast, but not the second. The spiraling wind fire hit him center mass and punched him through what remained of a tower. The impact sounded like a door being kicked in 15 rooms away. Jiraiya didn't watch him land. He kept working. The army learned to die faster. Some he cut. Some he pushed apart with pressure so abrupt their shapes forgot how to stay together. All went to ash and were swept away by the rain as if the city had already scheduled their absence and was relieved to be back on time. When it was done, the plaza looked like the bottom of a kiln. Glass flowed in slow sheets, rebar wept orange. Jiraiya stood in the middle, breath even now, though his hands shook the tremor small and mean and very human. The glow in his eyes rained itself back down to something survivable. He rolled his neck. It hurt. He liked that it hurt. Pain rose from the rubble, cloak ragged, palm cracked open just enough to show teeth. He looked around at the absence of his army and did the arithmetic again from the beginning. Impossible, he said, and meant it this time. How are you still standing? Jiraiya tightened his grip one more fraction for the blade to feel like it belonged to him and not the other way around. Because I'm not standing for me. He lifted his head toward a future he would not live to see. I'm standing for the kid who still believes people can be better. Thunder answered. The storm above leaned in. The plaza held its breath. And then the last battle began. The city was gone. Amagakure's skyline burned like the ribs of a dying sun, towers bending and slumping into glass. Heat shimmered where streets used to be. The rain came sideways, hissed when it touched anything still alive. And in the center of the ruin stood Jiraiya broken, bloodied, unbent. His hands were cut to the bone, but his grip didn't falter. The polearm hummed, faintly now, like a heartbeat under too much weight. Each breath rasped against ribs cracked in 3 places. He could feel the countdown in his own pulse, not fear, just arithmetic. He looked up at the storm and thought of faces. Zoe's face first, the small idol. Girl crumpled at a funeral too large for anyone her size. She had buried her face in Gaara's gourd, shaking so hard she couldn't breathe, whispering, he deserved more, until her throat bled. Jiraiya remembered standing at the back with Naruto, the boy's shoulders rigid and eyes too old. That grief had carved something permanent into him. Then the wreckage that mountain of a man brought to his knees, forehead pressed to the marble beside his brother's coffin, whispering, "Forgive me." He had cried without sound, only the tremor of his fingers betraying it. And Yujito, the cat-eyed girl who had once teased Jiraiya for calling himself old man when he couldn't be older than the thunder. He'd promised to take her for ramen the next time she visited the leaf. There would never be a next time. He had trained half of them. Sparred with the rest. He didn't need their names to know them. He knew them by the shapes they made when they laughed, by the little burns their resonance left in the air after a fight, by the way they never once hesitated to step between a monster and the world. He could still remember walking through the village streets long ago, hearing the kids' laughter spill from every corner, chasing one another between the dumpling stalls, swinging toy blades made of wood, shouting, "When I grow up, I'll be a hunter too." That noise was life. That noise meant home. And now there was nothing. Only rain and fire and ghosts. He remembered his first hunter exam. Mud in his hair, BLD in his teeth, and Sarutobi's proud grin when he'd stumbled across the finish line. "You're reckless," the old man had said. "But your heart's in the right place." He'd laughed back then, young and cocky, "I'll be the greatest hunter in the world, you'll see." And Sarutobi had sighed. "I hope not. The world doesn't need great men. It needs good ones." He hadn't understood that until much, much later. Now he finally did. He looked at his hands, at the scars, the burns, the memories written into every knuckle, and realized how much he missed the world. The smell of wet soil after rain. The clatter of ramen bowls. The sound of Tsunade's laughter before she hid it behind a drink. He missed her the most. He could still see her in the Hokage's office before he left, golden eyes trembling, fists clenched on her desk. "Don't do this," she'd begged. "You don't have to prove anything anymore." He had smiled, that stupid, gallant grin she'd always hated because it meant he was lying. It's not about proving anything, Sue. It's about the kid. She'd slapped him hard. He hadn't even tried to dodge. Her hand had lingered on his cheek afterward, shaking. Don't you die on me, Jiraiya. Not you. He wished he'd told her then that he loved her, not the way you say it in bars, not the way he joked about in front of the others, but really loved her. Loved her enough to let her go on living when he couldn't. He'd wanted to marry her once, back when life still looked long. He'd wanted to raise a family, have loud, messy kids who would one day roll their eyes when he told stories about his youth. But he'd spent his years raising other people's children instead. Teaching them. Training them. Burying them. He'd taught Zoe how to fight dirty and win with grace. He'd taught Yujito how to bait an enemy stronger than herself. He'd taught Han how to breathe through fear. He'd taught Minato how to hope. And Minato gods, that boy. The one who never gave up, who laughed too easily, who carried sunlight in his chest like it was armor. He had trained him until his hands bled. He had stood beside him on the day he was promoted and said, half joking, "You'll outshine us all, BRT." And Minato had just smiled, soft and sincere, "I learned from the best." He thought of Kushina next, fire and warmth and heart. She had punched him square in the face the first time they met, then apologized with ramen and sake. She was everything the world needed, more of sharp edges and endless love. And their boy. His legal grandson now. His heart walking around in another body. Naruto. The idiot who loved too hard, forgave too fast, laughed through pain. He'd promised to protect him. To make sure the kid had a chance to be better than the rest of them. And he'd done his best. But you can't shield someone from destiny. You can only teach them how to stand. He thought of Naruto the last time they saw each other, that awkward hug, the half smile, that "don't die, old man," thrown like a joke. He wondered if the kid knew how much he meant it when he said, "You're my pride, BRT." Now he hoped he'd feel it. When the time came. He lowered his eyes. Pain was rising from the rubble, body flickering with godlight, the false calm of a liar who thinks he's almost won. "You wanted purpose?" Jiraiya murmured. "Here it is." The ground trembled. Cracks spread like veins, light and shadow leaking from the earth. From those wounds came 8 silhouettes, each too familiar. The sand raccoon, its body grinding against itself, the blue-flamed cat, the ocean turtle, the storm-crowned goat, the fire-maned monkey, the molten earth slug, the luminous beetle with glass wings, and last, the 8-tailed octopus whose limbs drank every scrap of light. Each roar carried a memory. Gaara's laughter under desert stars. Yujito's teasing grin as she cracked her knuckles. Rashi humming to himself while polishing his blade. Han's quiet nod after a spar, sweat steaming off his shoulders. B's rhymes, terrible and perfect. All of them, their warmth, their defiance replaced by Sayaka's hollow choir. Pain's voice rolled through the thunder. "You wanted justice, old man. Here it is. Look at what your world did to us." Jiraiya's chest tightened. He drove the polearm into the ground, the impact ringing like a bell. "You took their lives and turned them into trophies. That's not justice." He lifted the blade. The world answered. Wind gathered around him in concentric ripples, pulling rain and ash into slow orbit. His hair lifted, white turning to flame-bright orange. His veins glowed. His heartbeat synced with the earth's. "I won't let their deaths be used for this." He moved. The beasts surged forward, 8 calamities sharing a single will. The city split beneath their weight. Lightning crawled across the sky like veins of a heart too angry to die. Jiraiya met them head-on. The raccoon's claw came first, sand condensed into obsidian. He stepped inside the swing, cutting upward through it, the grain exploded, reforming as a storm of razors that sliced his cheek open. He spun, wind gathering at his back, and slammed the end of the polearm into the cat's jaw. Blue fire splattered into droplets that burned holes through the rain. The turtle's water surged next a tidal wall that swallowed half the plaza, but he drove a column of fire through it, boiling the wave into steam before it reached him. His arms ached. His lungs felt like paper ready to tear. He kept moving. The goat's lightning speared him across the ribs. He caught it, twisted it, and sent it screaming back, searing a hole through the creature's chest. The monkey's fire washed over him, the heat so bright it turned bone white under his skin, but the wind around him spun faster, turning the inferno outward in a halo. The slug's earth bolts hit next, crushing, the beetle's light followed, blinding. Darkness from the octopus rolled over everything, swallowing sound. Through it all, Jiraiya fought not like a god, but like a man who had already forgiven the world for killing him. Every strike cost him something. He could feel parts of himself burning away, memories unraveling, warmth draining from fingers, the taste of sake and laughter dissolving into static. He didn't care. The only thing that mattered was the promise, the kid, the boy who still believed. He drew in breath. Minato, he whispered. Kushina. Naruto. I hope you're watching. He slammed the polearm into the earth and screamed. Light exploded outward, orange, white, gold, the air itself igniting into pure resonance. His form blurred, every edge of him vibrating too fast to see. When the glow settled, he was cloaked head to toe in living energy, his body a silhouette inside a sun. He wasn't borrowing nature anymore. He was burning his soul. Pain froze mid-command, horror dawning. No, you're. Jiraiya's voice was layered thunder over wind. Miruk. The first light. I borrow his strength for one last lesson. He vanished. The beasts reeled. Sand melted. Fire turned to glass. Lightning diffused into rain. He was everywhere at once, an orange streak cutting through elements, slicing through forms that had once been friends, whispering apologies each time the polearm found home. I'm sorry, Gaara. I'm sorry, Yujito. Forgive me, B. One by one they fell, bursting into fragments of light that drifted upward like fireflies finally freed. Pain's scream split the sky. Stop. He rushed forward, rods forming in both hands. Jiraiya met him halfway, their strikes colliding, resonance erupting in shockwaves that tore the last buildings apart. For an instant they were silhouettes inside the sun. Then Pain's body faltered, Jiraiya's blade buried in his chest, light spilling through the wound. Pain's knees hit the ground. His eyes burned brighter than ever, fury eclipsing pain. You can't. He snapped his hands together. The remnants of the 8 beasts, shredded but alive, coiled back together, driven by Siaka's rage. 8 tails of light, fire, and shadow lanced forward and impaled Jiraiya clean through. He gasped, a sound more human than anything that had come from him in hours. The world stilled. Rain hung suspended. The roar of power dwindled to silence. Even Siaka seemed to hesitate. Jiraiya looked down at the 8 wounds. Light spilled from them, running in rivers down his armor, soaking into the shattered ground. His polearm flickered. He could no longer feel his hands. He smiled anyway. Faces came to him, Minato's awkward grin, Kushina's scolding laugh, the boy who carried both of them in one stubborn heartbeat. Zoe's trembling fingers at Gaara's grave. Rumi's tears as she tried to hold Naruto together. The Leaf children training until dusk, their laughter cutting through the weight of everything he'd failed to save. It was enough. His knees gave. He let them. The polearm dissolved, light crawling up its, releasing itself back into the world like breath returning to air. The glow crawled over him too, sealing his eyes in gold. He felt the rain on his face again, not knives this time. Just rain. You did it, kid, he thought. You became everything I hoped for. Pain staggered toward him, chest still burning, desperate. Know your resonance, give it to me, it belongs to Siaka. He reached for the light, but the moment his fingers touched it, it broke apart not into shards, but into wind. Golden dust spiraled upward, humming a soft, familiar tune, and shot eastward across the sky, strkng like dawn toward Seoul. Conan's voice trembled. He sent it away. Payne's jaw clenched. To where? Thunder answered from far off, a rolling echo traveling toward the sunrise. To the boy, Conan whispered. To the Namikaze. Payne turned, eyes blazing, fury twisting his face. Then let him come. Let him see what becomes of gods. Below them, Jiraiya's body lay still. The rain washed his BLD clean, leaving his face peaceful, mouth curved in the faint smile of a man who had finally found his rest. For a long time, neither god nor angel moved. The rain fell in slow sheets, hissing on the molten ground. Then the clouds above split one last time, lightning carving a path toward the east. And the world remembered that once, long ago, a mortal fought gods and won. The bottle was half empty, the desk half covered in papers Tsunade wasn't reading. Rain pressed against the windows in steady sheets. It wasn't the clean kind that washes grief away, this was the kind that just stayed, heavy and mean. A knock was heard from the door, blue light crawling through the cracks as it opened, and Celine stepped into 10 room brushing rain from her jacket. She'd been in Seoul. She hadn't even changed out of her flight gear. Lady Tsunade, she asked. You called me. The Hokage didn't answer. She sat slouched in her chair, elbow on the armrest, a glass hanging from her fingers. Her hair was a mess. The great slug princess of the leaf looked small. Ma'am. Celine crossed the room, slower now. What's wrong? Tsunade blinked at her, unfocused. Her lips moved once before the sound came. He's gone. Celine stopped. The words didn't land right at first, they just sat in the air like static. Then her stomach dropped. Who? She asked, already knowing. Already afraid. Tsunade set the glass down hard enough that the liquor sloshed over her knuckles. Jiraiya. The name hit like a body blow. Celine gripped the back of a chair, fingers whitening. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. Couldn't even swear. The rain filled the silence. 17 years ago flashed behind her eyes the night Jiraiya had come to her door in the storm, soaked through, cradling a blonde boy who wouldn't speak. He'd said, he's lost everything. Please just give him a home for a while. She'd hated him back then, thought he was reckless, arrogant, another war relic pretending to be a savior. But he kept coming back. He brought the kid food. He stayed to train him. Sometimes he trained with Rumi too, patient even when she mouthed off. He fixed fences around her house when he thought she wasn't looking. He laughed loud, cried quiet, and treated Naruto like he was BLD. Over time she realized he wasn't a hero. He was just good. And that made him family. Celine swallowed hard. Where? Tsunade's eyes glistened, red around the rims. Amigakure. He went alone. Celine looked out the window, at the rain hammering the village roofs. Of course he did. The Hokage covered her face with one hand. Her voice broke around the words. I told him not to go. He smiled at me like it was nothing. Like he was already halfway gone. Celine exhaled, long and shaking. He always did that. For a moment they stayed like that, one drunk, one standing, both broken in the same way. Then Celine stepped closer and placed a hand on Tsunade's shoulder. He died the way he lived, she said softly. Taking the fall so someone else wouldn't have to. Tsunade didn't answer. Her shoulders trembled. The hand holding the glass finally dropped, and it rolled off the desk, shattering on the floor. Outside, thunder rolled east toward the boy Jiraiya had loved like his own. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 16. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author Slygold on FANFICTIONnet. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.